Hello and welcome to my workshop, Managing for Resiliency with Your Sheep and Goats. My name is Leslie Sacchina and I run Silent Rolling Acres, a grass-based meat, goat, and sheep farm in western Wisconsin. And I'll share a little bit more about my background in just a minute, but this is a presentation that I did recently for the GrassWorks Conference in southern Wisconsin. It's our state grazing conference for Wisconsin. And I was asked to present on a topic that would serve small ruminant producers, so the folks who raise goats and sheep, with a wide range of experiences. So whether that be new or aspiring farmers or those who are experienced. And so as I kind of was looking at how I would cover a topic, I wanted something that would reach and speak to a lot of different audiences kind of in this big topic. And this is where this kind of came to be. And the other note is some of the themes in this presentation also really speak to things that I've talked with some of my educator colleagues in our area that I work with grazing and also with small ruminants, and things that they were seeing with farmers or hearing or experiencing in terms of maybe some challenges or struggles, and again, things they were like observing or things they were hearing. And that's kind of where I came to the topic of resiliency and recognizing how can we continue to be stronger as farmers and have a stronger herd and a stronger farm in our operation, so we can weather kind of these ups and downs of being farmers. So I will get into this more, but I just wanted to give you a context. I've adapted it a little bit from the exact presentation I gave, but it's essentially the same. So as you get into this, recognize this is targeted towards grass farmers, and so those who are raising their animals on pasture, and also upper Midwest as well, just to kind of give a lens of things as well. So we'll get into this. If you've got questions for me later, you can feel free to put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to try to follow up on things. I will also include links to all the references and resources in the comments below, or I'll have a link to my blog where you can access those as well too, depending on how YouTube lets me add those things in. So a little bit more about myself. As I mentioned, my name's Leslie. I run Silent Rolling Acres. We raise Boer Kiko cross goats and Texel sheep. All of our animals are raised on pasture. We use rotational grazing practices throughout the year, with the exception of when it's winter here in Wisconsin, where we feed hay. We direct market and sell our goats in a variety of ways, but currently we are selling everything through our website by the cut to our customers, and also delivery through nationwide shipping and also local pickup. Our sheep, eventually we would like to add that into the mix for direct sales. We work with a wholesale buyer for those as well, specifically in the grass-fed market. Outside of my work as a grazer and a farmer, a small part of my farming business is also consulting and education related to meat goats, direct marketing, and grazing. Again, very goat focused, and that's where you'll find resources on my blog, grazingwithleslie.com, and so forth. Is kind of a accumulation of folks coming to me and wanting to learn more about what we're doing, and how I could kind of gather those resources together to help others out. And I also recognize in the goat world there's not a lot of vetted resources out there, and a lot of what I share, which you'll see in this presentation today, is really focused on a mix of my personal experiences along with vetted research practices, best practices of what's out there, whether that's related to goats and sheep, potentially maybe even beef, other ruminants, and how you can kind of apply it in a sheep and goat perspective. As in terms of vetted research, my first job out of college and I have training in journalism. So as a writer, always looking for sources and references. And it's kind of that same of my master's degree mind of writing theses and so forth. So that's where you'll see a lot of research and references in here as well. That's just kind of how I like to look at things and make decisions as a farmer, but also how I like to share information, education, that blend of applied experience and learning through doing of what I'm doing on my farm, or things I've seen others do or I've read about, combined with also like real research that has been done as well. So that gives you some perspective of where I'm coming from as well. I'll also note, while I raise sheep, we've been raising, I'm more well known for raising goats. So this presentation, while I tried to make it more comprehensive, it is still from the lens of my background of raising meat goats for the purpose of meat. But again, I think there's a lot that can be learned and applied when you think about it in different contexts within the sub-niche of small ruminants and the utility or purpose of your herd or your flock. Okay, so into the presentation itself. What does it mean to be resilient? Resiliency is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or a significant source of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace or financial stressors. Sorry about that typo. That was there when I presented and I forgot to update it for this. I'm really taking a psychology framework look at resilience for this presentation today, which is a little bit different approach when you think of our typical evaluation or study of topics. When you look within agriculture, within the grazing world, livestock world, we're usually, hyper focused on a topic from a very practical level. So we're going to be taking a look at resilience from a big picture level, and then also dive into those different topics as well. But I wanted to look at it from a psychology perspective because ultimately resiliency is really how we function as a human being. And if we can be more resilient as an individual and with our flock and our farm, in turn, that all kind of interacts together. So how resiliency may help us approach challenges. Really, resiliency is about how we handle challenges and stress. It can make things a little bit easier for us and get through those challenges. It doesn't mean the challenges will not be there, but they will definitely be there. But it's a matter of like how we handle it and maybe how extreme the challenges will be or how they impact us individually or in different facets of our farm operation. And really different tactics or strategies can help us reduce some of these stressors and make us more resilient, which really means less ups and downs. So if you look at, actually my head's kind of in the way here. I'll go back. I am recording I guess I can't go back, in a different, let's see, it won't let me go back. All right. Well, I'm recording in a different tool today just to try it out, and I can't go back. But the ups and downs on those charts really, like, you can see where, like, if you're kind of taking a intentional approach, it obviously you can't prepare for everything, but in theory, you should be able to level off some of those ups and downs so they're not so big and not so low, not so high and not so low. Making yourself and your operation a little bit more resilient. So as you're getting into looking at this slide here are some examples of challenges grazers might face from the perspective of small ruminants in your herd, in your flock, your context in your farm, in your business, and also in your permanent life. Your personal life. Your life should be, well, you know what I'm saying, just a mispronunciation there. Okay, so it would be behoove me to also address ecological resilience because we're grazers and we work inside a biological context. I think this is important to note as well too because some of the things we'll talk about also touch into this area of resiliency as well. So ecological context is a theory or a framework to understand the dynamics of an ecosystem and the amount of disturbances an ecosystem can withstand without having major changes or impacts on that ecosystem. So today, as we get into this, now we're going to talk about resiliency. We're really looking at resiliency as a sheep and goat grazer. And so we're looking at this kind of in a 4 framework system. So we have our herd or our flock, our farm, our business. All those items can have some overlap on how you on the objectives of how they impact, or have impacts on those other areas. And then ourself, like who we are as an individual, can definitely influence those areas on how we're doing, how we're feeling, how other things in our life are happening, and vice versa. The activity on our farm can have an impact on how we're doing as an individual. So really our ultimate goal of having a resilient farm and being a resiliency is really about resiliency in all aspects of our lives, not just our goats and sheep, not just our pastures, not just our soils, and not just our farm business. It's really recognizing that we are whole people. So today I'm going to be covering 27 tools for resiliency as a sheep or goat farmer. And really, I want you to think about this in the perspective of use what fits in the context of your life and farm, as well as over time. It's not intended to be comprehensive, nor one size fits all. It's all about mindset shift and using tools to help you along the way. I want you to kind of think about, like, are there things that you can do in your operation or tweaks to help make different aspects of your farm more resilient, therefore kind of helping the bigger picture. And there may be instances of examples in here that you may need to tweak and adjust to fit the needs of your farm, the context of your farm. And that can be in a lot of perspective of, like, where your farm is located, kind of the context of, like, your family dynamics, and those needs and commitments you've got there. Also, how many animals. I mean, there's a wide range of factors that can go into this. So again, these are just tools, pick and choose, adapt, but it's really designed to think about different ways, components that can be layered in to be more resilient. All right, so our first section is going to be focusing on your flock or your herd, and the goal really is looking at producing a low input, high quality performance and products from your herd or flock. And the results is lower cost of production, lower labor, healthier animals, lower death rate, increased margin opportunity for your operation. Excuse me. So sourcing your goats and sheep, this is like the foundation for when you think about your herd and flock. It really starts with that. And you really need to be looking at placing a priority on sourcing animals from similar management practices, whether that's on grass or brush. And you're really going to have a more successful transition of your herd or your flock to your operation if they're coming from a similar management practice. Breed choice can have an impact on how you choose your options or your herd your animals for your farm. Some animals are more well suited for this type of management practice of raising them on grass and grazing. Some are not, but that doesn't necessarily mean all animals of that breed would be a good fit for grazing. So you want to make sure you're kind of doing a mix of looking at where you source, and you can take into consideration some breed choice as well too. So for example, some breeds tend to be more parasite resistant, while some are not as hardy, but again, not one size fits all. So kind of keep that in mind. And also, it kind of comes into the same thing as well, within a breed. Kind of keep in mind, even with registered animals, there can be really high quality registered animals that meet similar management practices. And if they have those benchmarks and those other measures that can support some of those breed characteristic or those specific characteristics you're looking for sourcing your animals, then that's great. But again, kind of like the breed, not everything will be a one-stop solution if you're just going based off of registered animals. You want to ask questions, see how they're being raised and managed from a feed management perspective, parasite management perspective, grazing perspective. It gives you an idea of the context of of how they're being managed and what kind of and being the context of where they're if they're thriving and doing well as well, and how that might translate back to how you're going to raise them. There are some instances where farms maybe do their own performance testing of genetics, and that can be really helpful. In that case, you want to talk with them about what are they testing for, what are they seeing, and that can be a helpful tool. Of course, you're taking them at face value, but a lot of times I found farmers who are really invested in this. I have no problem sharing all their numbers, but that's an individual case basis, but they're really passionate about their efforts to do so. But that can be based on, so it can be their own process, but also there are a number of universities that do university performance testing, predominantly with bucks over does, but that can also be a way to look for genetic lines that may be more hardier and more parasite resistance, have a higher rate of gain on pasture. And again, looking at stock that it's going to be a good foundation for starting in this type of management system. Number 2 is managing and growing your herd or your flock. So this is as you kind of continue to grow your herd and flock. What does that look like? And so you really want to think about what are your priorities for your herd, and what does that mean for when you look at selecting animals that continue to stay in your herd or flock, and what you're choosing for breeding stock as well. And so some suggestions to look at are rate of gain and hands-off lambing and kidding abilities, mothering abilities, parasite resistance. Rate of gain is probably still a strong characteristic even if you're not raising for meat, but it may not be as a priority depending on your utility. But these are some examples to set for yourself. What are your priorities, and then your benchmarks. How are you going to do this? And then also take into consideration, is this process for measuring these characteristics? Is it you want it to be meaningful, but you also want it to be manageable. If you're spending all your time collecting data, you maybe have a lot of time lost in labor doing that, and it may be a really maybe not a good use of your time. But if you can work it into times when you are already managing your herd or have your hands on them to record those numbers, that can really make sense. And maybe you add in 1 or 2 other times outside of that, and then it becomes more manageable. Again, think about your timing. Are there times when you can align collecting data with other work that you're doing with your herd? And then, of course, have a record keeping process, and only keep stock that fits within your parameters. So unfortunately, not all animals, should be bred, especially from the perspective, if you want to continue to grow a resilient herd, you need to make some of those choices of keeping the ones that fit within your parameters and find another use for those who are not in those parameters. Some great resources here. We've got the Tennessee State University has an on-performance testing guide for meat goat doe herds, so kind of how you can recommendations on how to evaluate and your herd on a regular basis, so in terms of selection of who will be bred in the future. While breeding choice isn't necessarily related to FAMACHA, it can be a good tool to have on hand if you're looking at how you're evaluating your herd on a regular basis for parasite resistance. It kind of layers in there for hardiness as well. This next one is kind of a play on what we've already talked about as well, growing your herd from within. So this is one more step, but really, instead of bringing in more animals into your herd or your flock, building your herd from within can have a lot of advantages. You're not going to have some of the transitional challenges that come with bringing in animals from different environments, and that happens no matter the environment, just because you can even have struggles from a farm or a ranch that is raising goats in a very similar manner. But the reality is, like, herds are immune to their unique factors in their, within their herd, or there's things that are unique to the context of a certain farm. And when you bring animals to a new environment and you introduce them together, it's just natural that there's going to be some, not always, but sometimes there'll be some transitional challenges, just combining animals from different herds and flocks and environments. It's just the reality of it. And so you just have to be prepared that will happen. But if you grow within, you have less issues with that, which can be really great outside of bringing, of course, a buck or ram. If you are continuing to build from within, you can also take advantage of some of the positive benefits of epigenetics. And epigenetics is really how your genetic traits are exhibited based on environmental factors that exist, in your environment where your farm is at, and those can compound over time generationally from one generation of your herd to the next. And there's a video link here that I'll include that talks a little bit more about epigenetics, just if you're interested in that topic as well. 4 is timing your lambing and kidding season with the highest quality pasture. Now, this pasture chart example is kind of the typical peak of how our pasture growth is in Wisconsin, the upper Midwest. So again, kind of take perspective depending on where you're at. Your chart may be a little bit different, and even ours will vary just depending on when spring decides to arrive. This year, it's probably going to peak like a lot earlier. As I look outside, we're a little bit colder right now, but it's 2024 when I'm recording this, and it's like a very unseasonably warm winter. So how do you kind of looking at this, does in your ewes have access to the highest quality feed source during lactation? Again, this is from like a meat perspective. It may be a little bit different if you're running sheep and goats for dairy. You'll probably need to make some adjustments based on feed, but if you're thinking about how your best use of your feed source on pasture, this is a really great way to time that so you can give those does and ewes the best quality of access when you have the highest quality access on pasture. And also when you kid and lamb later in the during that peak, you're especially in our area where we're in a cold weather climate, you're not lambing and kidding in winter or late spring in our area, when late spring sometimes still means snow and cold weather. So that means you're going to have less need for intervention, less stress on your does and ewes during kidding and lambing, especially even with like first timers. They can have a little more time. It's not as urgent to get there to help them. And also less stress on us as grazers and farmers and caretakers for our animals as well. Number 5 is minimizing environmental stress and monitoring your herd during anticipated stressful times. So this is really just being mindful on how you observe your herd and flock when there's known stressors. So some examples of that could be during lambing and kidding season, weaning, weather swings, maybe any historical trends of parasite challenges, timing on your farm, and watch for health implications during that time. I'm always having a watchful eye when I look at my herd on a daily basis, but when I know that there's these times of peaks of stress, I'm going to want to spend a little bit more time more intentionally observing animals to see if there's any animals that might need some extra attention from us because of those stressors. And it's really just a proactive approach in how you monitor your herd health. And so you don't really miss, part of that too is so you don't miss anything with your herd. And I found that as our herd has grown over time, some of these factors, if I can even run animals through the chute and get a better look at them, I know I'm not missing any animals because I'm looking at every single one versus like scanning my herd and my flock out on pasture. And this doesn't mean I'm deworming everybody during these stressful times. I'm just talking about visually and hands-on watching for anything that can be an issue and trying to catch it before it becomes a bigger problem. And maybe it means deworming some if they need it, but it's not like I'm doing everything to everybody. But I have a better coverage and observation of my entire herd and flock from a preventative standpoint. So the next area we'll move into is a focus on pastures and farm infrastructure. And the goal of this is really a resilient pasture-based system and farm operation. Really the results in ability to manage challenges and work through stress easier, and also manage your farm operations for more efficient work. So we'll start with adaptive grazing. And again, as I mentioned, this is a presentation that is really focused on grazers. So if you're watching this, you probably already know that because you've have seen how we raise our animals and the focus of our farm. But adaptive grazing is really it's a similar concept to managed grazing, where animals are in smaller paddocks for a short period of time. But the difference, I guess what makes adaptive grazing adaptive instead of just managed grazing, is that when you move animals to a new paddock, your paddock sizes may change based on different factors that exist in your pasture, the way the whole pasture is set up, the number of animals you have, the seasonality of things. So that may, the size of the paddock may change. When you come back for your second rotation, the paddocks may be different based on a number of factors. So it's not having the same spot every time. And that's really the biggest context, is adapting to the context of the environment where you're at. And, just as an example, the last few years, our farm really has had to adapt as we were grazing in a system where we have more drought-like conditions. So even though in the spring we had the spring flush of our pastures, things really slowed down. So we adapted our grazing approach. So we actually gave our pasture a lot longer rest. And then we came back into graze. We actually were grazing larger paddocks later season because of that growth rate had really slowed down compared to early in the season when we were moving through smaller sections as well. But again, it's all very unique into what is happening on your farm and your climate and so forth. Some additional considerations as you think about adaptive grazing, and we'll touch on these again a little bit in a couple other tips, but grazing no lower than 4 to 5 inches. This is really from the concept of the parasite larvae follow moisture up about 3 inches on a plant. So again, we want to kind of minimize parasite exposure. And then just to note, as you kind of think about grazing contexts, and I also think about some of my peers I've talked with, kind of regionally and locally, that have talked about, well, I tried grazing, but it was kind of it didn't really kind of work. And I'm like, well, tell me about how you did it. And well, we'd put them in a paddock for a week, and then we'd move them again, and then again, and it'd be kind of like a month rotation system. And actually, there's some research out there that suggests that a 4 paddock weekly move doesn't really provide any parasite benefits compared to continuous grazing in pasture. And continuous grazing is really where you put them out in one big pasture and they stay there and they just graze, and you don't move them into specific areas. So I just want to point that out as you kind of think about the context of grazing and so forth, if depending on where you're at on your level of experience and utilizing grazing with your sheep and goats. So timing, number 7 is timing in a paddock. This is where we're kind of slice and dice grazing a little bit more. Graze in a paddock, ideally one day. Again, context, you got to kind of think about what makes sense in your environment and timing. We talked a little bit about height. And so why one day? So there's a couple of reasons why one day is really ideal. Parasite management benefits. So it can take as soon as 4 days for larvae to develop. So if you're moving your animals before day 4, so we really try in our farm to graze once a day, or moving every other day, but 3 days max, just because that larvae stage, those larvae will start to hatch and become an issue for parasites through your goats. So that 4 days is really key to be aware of. So that's why 1 day is really ideal, because you're minimizing, again, that exposure. And then the other piece is feed quality. So feed quality is more consistent day to day with daily moves. If you think about the perspective is that your livestock, when you move them to a new paddock, they're going to be eating the higher quality parts of the plants and plant species that are in that pasture, and then continue to eat what's left each day preceding. And if you move them into a new paddock each day, in theory, they are getting the similar type of nutritional context because they're eating the same type of component of that paddock from move to move versus high level, a little bit lower quality, and a little bit lower quality from day to day if they stay within a paddock. The other component with feed quality too, if you want to kind of get into a little bit of tips and strategies too, is moving animals to a new paddock in the afternoon when Brix level sugars tend to be the highest can also be can be a benefit as well too for giving your animals higher access to higher quality feed in the afternoon. And so that the sugar levels our base Brix levels, or which are sugar levels, kind of will change throughout the day, and it also will change in pasture and also if the sun is out, but it's related to photosynthesis, and they tend to be higher in the afternoon, and a higher sugar content is can give more nutritional benefits. And there's even some research within beef that show that there's higher rate of gains with higher Brix levels. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Brix, there's some links that will have included that are in this in the presentation resources as well. So paddock rest time is number 8, and ideally at least 60 days rest time. And this is really based off of the northern US, so you can kind of adapt as you look at it for recommendations in your region. But research has shown larvae can survive for 30 days, and that's in the tropics. And some of the researchers kind of anticipated or hypothesized that in northern climates up to 60 days or longer in our area. So if you can give your paddock more rest, it's going to help with parasite management from a preventative approach. Also, more rest can be really good for the health of the soil. There's other benefits from that perspective. But you also think about, okay, so what about during the rest period? What can you do with that pasture? So you can stockpile it, just let it grow, and you can graze it. At some point, the quality might diminish a little bit, but animals can definitely still eat it. So you kind of have to factor what's important for you, or or where are your priorities, and does it matter with where your animals are at if they're eating the quality of where that stockpile is. You can make hay on it, you can mow it, and even if you mow it and you leave the residue on the pasture, can be really good from adding more organic matter. So just the simple act of mowing can also be a benefit as well. If you want to make sure that when you come back to graze later, you're not dealing with maybe some pasture or grass that's headed out a little bit or maybe past its prime. Again, all preference and different goals and different objectives. Some people don't care about it as much, and some do. And then you also, if you've got cattle, you can graze cattle following small ruminants since they don't share the same parasites. And you might even be able to shorten up that rest time if you wanted to try it from that perspective. Number 10 is winter feeding. So approach to take a look at is utilizing bale grazing. And so this is strategically feeding hay on pasture over the winter, and you're feeding in a new location with each bale. And so the benefits of this is less labor, more efficiency with feeding. So if you're feeding a large brown bale, it should be, you versus hand feeding. If you're not, by feeding outside, you're going to have less labor cleaning the barn as well. And then from benefit for the soil, from bale grazing, there's the benefits of added organic matter, increased fertility, water infiltration. There's a number of other benefits as well that can present depending on where where your farm is located and how much how cold your winters get. Sometimes another version of bale grazing could be unrolling bales. That could be maybe a better fit for your farm as well too, if you're in a little bit warmer climate where maybe you get more rain. It potentially could be an option as well. It kind of depends on what might be a fit for your operation as well from that perspective. Number 11 is working your goats and sheep. So it's really easy with sheep and goats to just use what you have, and kind of, I was laughing with somebody else after this presentation when I gave it the first time, she called it like sheep rodeo, and I said, oh yeah, definitely. Or she's like, it's like a rodeo. I said, yes, definitely. We always laugh and call it goat rodeo. And you can get away with a lot handling goats and sheep because of their small size. I get that. We did that for a long time. But I really recommend consider looking at doing like a do-it-yourself setup for a working chute and alleyway, or even get an official working chute system. And a few years ago, we invested in a working chute system. We have a portable one. Because we graze and we have animals in the woods. For us, portable was important because there are times where we can work in the barn with our chute system, but in the summertime, the reality is our animals are out on location, and if we need to handle them, we need some type of setup. And so that's why we went with a portable system that we could hook up to our tractor and bring out to where we were at. But do-it-yourself system, but they are an investment. So, I mean, I get that. And the do-it-yourself setup, you can set it up with, along a wall of your barn. You can even do T-posts with pallets, with, old gates, and you can run them through where you can put animals into a holding area, run them through a little alleyway, and pull it one at a time. We used to do that. And then put them on like a hoof trimming stand, and work with them individually that way. It's still a lot smoother. I think either one of those options can work really well, and then you can kind of decide as you move along. It can streamline your work, but it helps reduce the stress of your animals, and also for the health and safety for you as well. You may think, oh, sheep and goats, it's not that big of a deal. My husband had hurt his arm while we were pulling animals off pasture. It shouldn't have been that big of a deal. In fact, it wasn't even a buck. It just happened to be the way he grabbed. He went to grab an animal, and he had hurt his arm pretty significantly. And we knew we always we should have a handling system, but it was a good, kind of like a wake up reminder of this is important for a variety of reasons, including our well-being, and what prompted it. So it's it's something to consider, but and then also thinking about like when you work them, so one thing is like having a system set up, but also like think about for when you work your animals, the timing is right. So like when are animals in a right location or easily moved into a working area versus spending a lot of time to get them back to the location of the working area? Can you combine multiple tasks to minimize extra handling or the need for extra help? So at our farm, we don't really need a lot of extra labor except for days that we are doing animal herd work. It helps to have a few extra people. So we try to get as much done on those days as possible versus bringing animals back into the chute to be handled again. And again, also planning for proactive animal health assessments as well too. On the kind of a related note, number 12, I talked a little bit about my husband's injury. This also prompted working dogs. But working dogs can be a great tool for your farm, and they can come in two areas. Moving or handling stock, that's actually, we also, after we got our working chute, we also invested in a border collie to help us move animals, and then also predator management. So these are obviously two different types of working dogs with different purposes. So you've got herding dogs and then livestock guardian dogs for predator management. Again, you want to help reduce and ease of handling animals, but then also and do it in a smooth process, less stress on the animals and also for yourself. Predator management, you really want to reduce and minimize any animal loss, especially when managing animals on pasture and young stock as well. 13, moving into portable fencing. So fence training can be a really important process for using portable fencing. And I've got a resource or a guide right here that I'll link below that gives you some tips on how to fence train your goats and your sheep to respect your fence. But if you're able to train your goats to respect fence, then you can actually move into using multi-strand fencing. If you want, for easier moves, it can be a little bit easier using whether you're using something like Gallagher's Smart Fence, which is a 4-reel-in-1 fencing tool that we use in our farm, or even if you set up step and posts with strands of hot wire, same thing as well. If animals are continually pushing the limits on not respecting the electric fence, instead of they went through the training, you're going to want to find a different home or different purpose for them. You don't want to have them in with your herd or your flock, because they will teach their bad habits to others in your herd or your flock, and you don't want to have issues with that as well. Also, electronet can be a really good option for getting started if you don't have a perimeter fence, or if you're getting comfortable with small ruminants. A lot of times also people are adding sheep or goats in with their cattle. Again, it can be an option to get started. And you also want to make sure you still train your animals to respect even electronet as well. So 14, using your electric fencing. You want to use it. If you have it, keep it on and keep it hot. And you want to make sure it's hot enough. But then when you go to use it, I know it can be easy, especially with net fencing. And if your goats respect it, to maybe not always turn it back on. And net fencing, because it's visual, it can be, it's less like, it's like, oh yeah, I don't need to turn it on because that just keeps them out. But you actually can have more issues with your net fencing if it's not on, with animals trying to maybe get one more bite on the other side of the fence. So keep it on, keep it hot. It's best for the animals as a whole in your herd, to keep them in, but also keep them safe as well too, even from like a predator standpoint as well. So also think about, like, when you're using your fencing, how can you make your paddock moves less labor intensive? So a few examples, these are not like things you use all at once, but is there a central point for water and minerals? So you're not necessarily moving everything back and forth or along in paddocks. So this might be if you're in a setup where you it can work like in a wagon wheel setup, and you keep your water and minerals in the center, this can work really well. If you're moving daily moves, you maybe don't put up your back fence, or you don't put your back fence back up every few rotations. meaning you don't necessarily need to move some of your other fencing infrastructure. If you have pasture shelters or water tanks and things along that line, you can move that every other move. I went to a soil health academy school a couple summers ago, and we were at Gabe Brown's farm, and they were showing us their move. It was with cattle, and of course with their cattle, they're moving them twice a day. But when they moved, I mean, this is no surprise. It was kind of like, well, of course they moved the animals forward and they just left the water and mineral back. Of course they're gonna go, they're well trained. If they're well trained, they're gonna go forward to get the fresh food. They know that. They're kind of geared up for that. But if they need water and minerals and other things, they can go back. And then if you are in that site, that move of a daily move, some of the issues with parasites are going to be less of a concern because you're still moving all the infrastructure before you hit that day, even 3 or 4. Using a seasonal water line can be helpful as well, so you're not moving as much water, like big tanks as well. Also, multi-species grazing can help fine-tune your time if you're grazing actually together as well. All right, so 15 is watering systems. So this can be seasonal or year-round. So seasonal and above ground systems with poly pipe can be a great option. We have this on our farm, and this is like black poly pipe that runs from the hydrant in our barn out to our pastures. And we're even looking at ways that can we add on another pipe and run it out to our woods, so it's easier to get water to our stock when they're out there doing grazing in our silvopasture Oak Savannah area. But the nice thing about black poly pipe is that it's fairly easy to set up on your own. Once you get the right equipment, you can do it yourself, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be buried underground. We just have ours on. We use ours throughout the season until we get our frost. We get close to having several days being below freezing, or we know that's coming, then we'll blow the lines out, and we just won't use them after that fact. And by that point, we're getting close to being done grazing, or we'll just use a big tank that we'll haul around. But anyways, seasonal ground water system is awesome. You don't need to bury. If you want to bury underneath like a driveway or a area where you drive through, that may be value, but other than that, you can just put it above ground and it works fantastic. Large tanks and totes, the gravity float can be a great place, especially in a central location. Frost-free drinkers for water, again, this is a bigger investment, but it can be really helpful in the long run. We just added these to our farm a few years ago as our herd has been getting larger, and we're obviously in a very cold climate. In the wintertime, we were filling tanks multiple times a day, multiple tanks for a group of animals. So you think from a time standpoint, but also a economic standpoint of cost to keep that heated from freezing. That watering system can be really helpful from an economic standpoint, but also well-being for yourself, and also ensuring that you have water all the time for your animals too. Okay, so now we're going to move into the business area for when we think about resiliency. And the goal in this area is knowing your financials, have market and sales opportunities for your farm and product and services, and also a lower cost of production, increased margin opportunities, and some cushion in your financials for the unexpected. So 16, know your numbers. And this is looking at your cost of production, marketing costs. Those would be your main expenses that you have for your operation. Also your income, and then margin. And your margin is your income minus your expenses divided over your income. It's just a measure to have an idea of where your margin is for your operation, and then also knowing your pricing for your products. And pricing really is important too, because if you know your operational costs, you can more adequately assess where your pricing needs to be based on your targeted margins, and also like where you're and what is like in line with your operation. You never want to base prices off of what somebody else's prices are, because you have no idea what their cost of production is. If this is just an enterprise that's stacked onto something else, if they're just picking numbers just because it sounds good. And it's not that uncommon for a lot of farmers, and I hope more are looking at factors that go into their pricing, but to just pick a number. And so you don't want to be picking a number based on somebody else's number that they just picked, is my point. So you want to have an idea of your cost of operation as well. And so over here, and this will be linked in the resources, but the Meat Suite from Cornell University has a calculator that is a really great tool for helping you take a look at your pricing. And then from there, you can make a decision. Does this make sense for the market we're in, my potential customer base, maybe what you're seeing, your other numbers you're using as benchmarks. The other piece of knowing your numbers is really about, then you have a better knowledge on how to manage expenses, evaluate your sales opportunities, or even have room in your margins to withstand risky years. And maybe, whether there's like swings in weather or other factors that might impact sales, you have a little bit of time, maybe wiggle room, before you decide to make adjustments to your operational costs or how you purchase things, because you know your numbers. You also are more informed to make reinvestment decisions, add staff, eliminate parts of your business that just maybe aren't working or you're not interested in managing anymore. It can be a really helpful tool to know those numbers. 17 is having the profit first mindset. And again, this is just a mindset on how you do things with your farm. And so you really want to think about your time and the value of your time. Where is your highest dollar work? And as farmers, we can be really, I'd say guilty, but we can be drawn to want to do projects around the farm over maybe some of the business side of operations, because let's be honest, most of us got into farming because we love the idea of farming and we love the work we do, maybe not necessarily to be a business member or run the books or even market as well too. So you need to kind of think about where's the best use of your time. And so you can use that decision mindset when you prioritize daily projects. So let's say you've got an email, if you use email marketing for selling your products, but you also have some projects outside, working on getting that email marketing done for the week should really be on your to-do list first before you go tackle that project outside, because that email is going to help generate money for your farm. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be spending time on the work outside, but it's kind of like how you make decisions and checking things off the list first. Also, it can be helpful to take a look at where, like if you're ready to hire help, where is the best use of time for help, or the best dollar value for help. It may end up being more on the production side, where you're going to be better use in the management side of things, because you have the overall goal and vision for your farm, and you should still be involved in those management marketing decisions. So likely, you might decide, okay, well, that makes the most sense. Or if there's areas where you do need help, let's say in marketing, but you still need to be involved in it, you might have somebody who helps with a consultant that may help with a component of things, but you're still involved. You got to think about where the dollar value of your time is going to be worth more on the business side of things than maybe the farming side as well. So again, it's profit first mindset, how you look at things. Again, you still need to have balance, because obviously you got to take care of things on both sides of the house per se. 18, being creative with your expenses. And this is just a different way to look at your expenses. We're not doing anything fishy or anything like that, but are there things that you can do to help manage those expenses, maybe in a non-traditional way? So for example, maybe you work with other farmers to swap with helping on herd health work days. I talked about this, that we've got, we don't really have a need for a lot of help on our farm, with the exception of herd health work days. And so that could be an instance where we could work with another farm in our area where we help them on their herd health days, and vice versa. And you also, you both have a good sense of animal handling and needs as well. swap for childcare. So we have some I know some farmers in our area that will alternate days of the week where they will kind of do childcare for each other, and so that means sometimes the parents will have full days of work that without a lot of extra interaction from kids. And farms are a great place for kids. Don't get me wrong, but when it comes down to, spending time on your bookwork or getting big projects done, or you're outside and there's equipment running around, everything just slows down when you've got kids around. And especially when they're young too, you want to make sure you give them enough attention. So there may be instances where, like, if you do some of that child care swap, that can help you have focused work, but maybe kind of minimize that expense of having to invest in childcare. Buy in bulk, this may mean more cost up front, but overall, in the long run, your expenses will be down. So for example, we do this with our shipping boxes. We will buy pallets of our shipping boxes. It's given us an ability to cut that cost per shipping box pretty much in half, compared to if we just bought them in smaller quantities. Also, looking at how you can share purchases with other farmers as well too. 19, just because you're grass-fed doesn't mean you need to sell direct to consumer. And as I say this, I think there's a place for more of us to be doing direct to consumer, but I also feel like sometimes when we're grass-fed, there's this like expectation that we should be selling direct to consumer, and obviously there is like greater margin opportunity and also more control of price when you sell direct. I get that. There is part of that also comes with farming is a lot of work, but then direct marketing is almost a job in itself. So even though there's more margin and you have more control over your end price, you have to spend a lot more time marketing and selling and raising awareness of what you have to offer with your customer base. And it's an ongoing system and process you have to keep. It's not keep moving in order to kind of keep building on what you're doing for sales. So I just put that out there that it's okay to not sell direct, or there's different ways to sell direct to customers too. So you got to keep that in mind as well too. So it's kind of finding the right fit. Part of this is like know your numbers. If you can build a business on selling to the market, so like the traditional like livestock market, just as an example, and then you can add in direct or wholesale as it makes sense. Maybe that can be a good way to get started, because you know that you have a good foundation, and then you can continue to add in as it makes sense. But just because you're grass fed doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that. So if you feel the pressure that you've got to sell direct, you don't necessarily have to, or it can look a little different on what makes sense for you and your operation. 20, consider wholesale opportunities. And for lamb and goat, this can really work in a couple different avenues, and of course more than even probably what I'm saying, but is selling whole or live animals. And so that's less risk than the commodity market. You have a little bit more say in the selling price, so a little more opportunity that way, and there's going to be less marketing expenses outlay. Depending on how you sell wholesale, you might need to do some marketing just because you may want to have a variety of wholesale buyers, just so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket for buyers. But it can be a nice way to move animals. And so this is an example. We've done wholesale over the years. We've done it in a variety of ways where we have buyers who coordinate the processing themselves. So we sell live animals, and then we've also had some where we will get the animals processed. And typically what has worked better for us is in terms of like being more competitive on pricing, but also making sure we're are profitable as farmers, is selling whole carcasses, so like primals, and selling those as a as a wholesale opportunity to customers typically. Then those customers would do the cuts themselves. It also can help with like lowering processing costs as well too. So those are some things to consider as well. 21, collaborate with other farmers or small businesses. So I talked a little bit about this before we look at expenses, but there can be some other ways to look at this. So supplying another farmer with additional goats or sheep for meat. Maybe there is another farmer in your area who is similar practices and already has a direct market process set up. They may very well be looking for additional supply to help meet the needs of their customers. So there can be a lot of avenues that way as well. You could look at, there could be ways to market products together, potentially working together on doing byproduct marketing or collaboration. I mean, it could be, even with like skulls or hides, leather work. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. And the key is also recognizing you don't need to do it all. So there can be avenues where you can collaborate where it makes sense for opportunities. 22 is diversification and stacking enterprises. And so some different examples of this could be your sales approach. So it could mean that you're selling to a commodity market, some wholesale, some direct, so you're stacking it that way. It could be the purpose of your operation. So maybe you have goats and you're doing brush management with them, and also selling meat, probably not fiber, because if you're dealing with brush, your fiber may not be great, but I could be totally wrong. I'm just thinking of mine with burdock and so forth. And then it also, you could layer in agritourism or other complementary product offerings. Oftentimes lamb and goat are complementary, even beef, depending on your market, could be part of that too. But I'd also disclaim to, you really want to do this where and when it makes sense, and you really want to get a good foundation for your core area of your business, especially in production and sales, before you add another stack. And a lot of farmers think that they need to offer more and do more right away, and it actually can really do like a major disservice to you if you're spread too thin and you don't have a good handle on your core business. But once you're ready, it can be a really great way to stack on enterprises to your operation and diversify. So, again, a little more resiliency because you've got a few different product or service options, but also, a little bit more strength financially as well. 23 is having a basic online presence. If you're ever thinking about direct sales, even if it's down the road, whether you're just getting started or it's just something you thought maybe it might be interesting to do. So a few things that you want to look at doing, and I've got more detailed checklist that you can access in our resources, is have a website that has your overall information about your farm, how they can get in touch with you, your contact information, how folks can access your products and services. You want to use this as your hub, your main base. You don't want to rely on social media in that regard. I can think of so many folks I know personally that have had a really good success on Facebook, and in the last couple months, they've lost access to their account for a variety of reasons, hackers or taken away for something that some reason they thought maybe was violating, that potentially they were in violation of some rule or so forth. And let alone we don't want to be at the mercy of the algorithm. The algorithm's always changing. You need to have a core place where you can send people to get access for your information. Anyways, I could talk forever about that. But then number 2, I have some social media. So yes, I recognize social is a really good place for building awareness and being in front of your community on a regular basis. I think that is good. You don't need to be everywhere. Pick one, do it well. Maybe set some expectations of 2 posts a week and that's it. You don't need to go crazy doing it all the time. Claim your Google My Business. This is actually can be really great for how your farm shows up when you Google, let's say, grass-fed lamb near me. It's how you can get show up on the list of businesses that are in that Google search. And you can also tie it to your website, so it can really help Google start to know who you are and help increase that search potential. And then also collect emails with an email service provider. Email service provider is simply just a online vendor tool that will help you create an online form. People can enter in their name and email address, and then you can manage your emails through there. Also send your emails through there, schedule them. The nice thing about using a tool like that, makes sure you're in compliance with the federal laws for emails, which include always having an option to opt out. You don't need to manage it yourself. There's a number of tools that are fairly low cost, economical, and there's recommendations in there as well. But you want to start collecting those, so that way if you want to sell later, or you have something to offer, they're there. You have an email list you've already been communicating with. And there's some more tips too that are in there in terms of approach and like strategy as you're starting out. But your supporters, you'll be surprised at your supporters that want to support you in there when you make the ask. But part of this is online presence is really about you may be surprised at what opportunities might come your way because you were accessible. I think about the first few years as we started farming, we had I already started my online presence because I was thinking about what I wanted to do down the road with our website and social, and we got approached about a lot of different things that we weren't ready to do, but it came my way because people were able to find us. So you got to make it easy for people who are looking for what you have to offer. Now, the last area is on personal, and this is really about being mindful of your well-being and the ability to manage challenges or work through stress easier. Also still maintain joy or purpose in your work, maintain healthy relationships with your family and those that mean the most to you. I think I saw meat on there. Mean, it's my brain of meat probably. Healthier and happier self as well too. So 24 is setting boundaries, really being, being entrepreneurs and farmers. Our work is there all the time, and the majority of us really have a passion for the work we do, or we had a driving passion, at least when we got started. And sometimes it's hard to shut it off, or it's hard, whether we want to keep doing it or we feel like the work is always there and there's always something that needs to be done. So it's really important to think about setting boundaries and being intentional about that, or at least this area, start small and kind of work up where you can kind of set yourself up for kind of, it's just being intentional about your time, but not letting the stress of work creep in before you realize and then at that point it may be too late. You kind of want to prevent it from creeping in. So some examples, these are just different approaches, ideas. It's not comprehensive at all, but have rules for your work hours. And this isn't posted rules that you put, in your work shed, for employees, but what's your guidelines for your work hours? And obviously we work in a seasonal business. There's gonna be times where this does not apply, but general framework. So, for example, for myself, I'm really trying to get the bulk of my work done Monday through Friday and before my kids get off the school bus. Sometimes, I still do stuff after school. There'll be projects we'll do on the weekend, but this is the bulk of my time when I'm getting my work done. And it makes, when I take then on the weekends when we're doing things with a family, I feel less pressure, less stress to have to go take care of other stuff with the farm. Yes, I'm still checking animals, I'm still feeding dogs, but there's less pressure to keep, the business churning, the work churning, because I have some parameters on how I manage my work. And as I've done that I would say I've been more intentional about the last 3 to 4 years. I feel more comfortable in I always feel like there's a ton of work to be done, but I feel more comfortable in my time and my tasks and getting things done, because I don't feel like there's always stuff like I gotta get done. Also, what you think about like what you don't want to do anymore. In many cases, if this is your own operation, you don't always need to do things that you used to do. You can evaluate that. Maybe there's things that you need to cut out from your work, or maybe involvement in your community. There's just, you can make choices on making adjustments. Time management approaches, time blocking can be a potential way to kind of look at how you manage your time, where maybe it's like Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning, you focus on solely office work. And Wednesdays are like just your days for prepping orders and getting things out the door. And then the other time is more like focused on farm projects. And obviously that's going to ebb and flow. And time blocking, I think, can work for farmers. And also give yourself grace because they were seasonal business, but like it can be helpful to like knock out similar kind of projects in a block of time, so your brain is kind of more in the mindset of the type of work you're doing. Watch the tech, learn to say no. Even setting pickup times or farm store hours can be really good for you and how you manage your time, and as well. And just work on honoring your own time just as you would somebody else. And this is one I'm continuing to work on myself, but I think a lot of this is like, if you're consciously thinking about it, you're going to, as a whole, kind of be a little bit more mindful of your time and your boundaries. You're never, like, this is life. Nothing's going to be perfect, but I think sometimes having that awareness can really set you up for a good foundation of your well-being as well. 25, again, this kind of builds off of the last one, but being intentional about your time, your health, your relationships, and that may be also like making time. So whether that's hobbies, outside interests, activities, volunteering, reading, taking vacation, social time. There's a variety of things here. You're probably thinking, Leslie, I don't have time for this stuff. I am busy. I've got my farm to run, or if you've got an off-farm job plus your farm. But I think like if there's times where you can carve out a time for maybe an afternoon off, or meet up with friends on the weekend, just taking time for yourself or with those other folks that mean a lot to you, that is not always like farm related. And maybe, it might be a little farm related, but like being intentional about making time for yourself and others that are important to you can be really good for your overall well-being. And sometimes getting started, you just have to schedule time for it, and it just start small. It doesn't have to be crazy wild, just be realistic about what you want to try to work into how you manage your time. And I will say, like, the times when we've gotten away from the farm for vacation, or I've taken time to meet up with some of my like old friends from college, my old roommates, like I come away from that like just refreshed. And maybe we talked a little bit about work and things like that, but overall, like you come away refreshed and energized, and I'm ready to like jump back into work and be excited about what I've got going on, because I've taken a break. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be something big, but like think about like how are there times where you could integrate that maybe in little smaller bits and pieces as well. 26, find community. And so this can be like inside agriculture or outside formal or non-formal organizations. And it's really about getting informal support and fellowship from others, and especially like I think within agriculture can be important. So I've got some examples in here within agriculture, and this is like very specific to the presentation I did with GrassWorks when we think about like some of the specific organizations in here. So some of these may or may not apply to your area, but I think like if you can connect with other people who are doing similar work as you, and they can be in your area regionally, they could be even broader. Like I've connected over the last few years with some different business groups of folks who are doing direct marketing and also education and outreach training. And it's been really great to talk about projects I'm working on or that we're working on. Like we all share in that space, challenges. Maybe if something pops up and say, hey, this just happened, can you help me run through this with me on what we're, how I'm going to tackle this? Does this sound all right? Like, it's nice to be kind of interacting with other people who are in the trenches of what you're doing, and it can kind of make you feel like a little less crazy sometimes in the work that we're doing, especially because we, in most cases, this is a very isolating work, because if we're a solopreneur, you may not always have people who are like right in your like local community or doing something similar, exact like in the same wheelhouse as what you're doing. So it is nice to have others that you can say, okay, this is kind of normal. I can ride this wave through. And again, this is like ups and downs as well. And so it's really great to have that community and make connections, and that can come in a lot of different ways. Whether it is ag related or, small business related as well, kind of help with that overall well-being. And lastly, seek help. It's okay to ask for help, and that is like, and this can be in all different levels, on the farm, in your home, your family, with your well-being, whether that's like hiring farm help, hiring a business consultant, childcare, meal prep, house cleaning, laundry, drop projects you don't need to, ask family for support, talk to friends, family, seek out mental health support. I think one of my friends who watched my presentation last week when I gave it, she was laughing with me and asked me how my one example worked. I talked about like managing, like when you manage a farm and your business, like there's just so much going on that even like in your house, it's like household, it's hard to manage. And sometimes that gets left behind. And so a couple of years ago, my husband and I decided to have our kids start doing their own laundry. They're 6 and 10. We still will like wash the laundry, but they will fold and put away their clothes. And so she was chuckling about, well, how's that going? I'm like, well, it's getting done. And it's obviously good for them to help. But like, are there things that you can do that it's like, it may not be perfect, it may not be how you want it done, but like, can you find other things to kind of relieve that pressure to like get it all done? And as a whole, like as we kind of think about, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself now as I wrap up, but like seeking help is totally okay, and we all can't do it all. And so you have to kind of pick out, like, if you're feeling the pressure that like something's got to change, like look in the gamut of how you're running your farm and your business, even inside like your personal life. Are there things that you can tweak and adjust, or say, I'm not going to do that anymore, or you can get help or ask for help? It can be really like, it can help in the big picture in what you're doing with your like for how you're doing, but also in the big picture sense of your farming operation too. So that's an overview of a number of tools for resiliency as a sheep and goat farm. And really, again, like we talked about, use and it fits in the context of your life and your farm as well as over time. It's not intended to be comprehensive or one size fits all. It's about a mindset shift and using tools to help you along the way. And remember, the ultimate goal is this holistic approach for you as an individual, as a grazer, and as a person. Resiliency is in all aspects of our lives, not just our goats and sheep, not just our pastures, not just our soil, not just our farms, but remember, we are whole people, and everything is like dynamic and interrelated, and really to help us kind of put our best foot forward. There's lots of little things we can do to help us continue to move ahead and do well in our life and our work as farmers and grazers. So I will include links to the resources and references in the caption below. If you're catching this like right away and you don't see them there, they are coming. Some of the resources, depending on how I can include them, I may end up just putting them in a blog post on my blog. So anyways, you'll find that material below. Also, if you've got any questions, ask them below. You also have my contact information here as well. And I've got a lot of great resources on my website, Grazing with Leslie. Thank you for listening to my workshop. I just thought, as I was reflecting on giving this workshop over the last week and feedback I got from it, I just thought it was, even though it was like a lot of tidbits, it was like too good. The message was like, I wanted to share it with more folks, because I think, you know, if you're in the farming community and you probably have like know that mental health and well-being is like on the forefront of making sure we take care of ourselves and as farmers. And while this isn't like, this area of resiliency really isn't about like, you know, I'm not a mental health professional. You know, I have some counseling skill sets from my work that I did when I worked in higher ed as an advisor, but like, I'm not a mental health professional. And this isn't meant to be mental health like focus, but it's more based on like just resiliency as a whole, which I think like impacts our mental health. And it also can be an approach, I would call it maybe like preventative, kind of being aware of our well-being and the well-being of our businesses and our farms and our pastures and all those components. You know, if we are mindful and kind of look for ways to make it more resilient, in turn, like that also is like a preventative approach from potentially, you know, not having some of these stressors become big stressors, becoming major challenges in our life, and where we might need more, you know, we might need to seek out mental health help. And it doesn't mean if you're there and you need if you need help, by all means, yes, you need to, I think, you know, it's totally fine, and you should reach out and talk with a professional or a friend about how you're feeling. But this context of this is really like, how do we stay in a good place before we get to this like point of high stress? So that's where this is at, and I hope if you stuck it out, I'm looking at my time here, thank you, and I hope you have a great day.